Kei aku whakateitei ki te whenua, kei aku whakatamarahi ki te rangi, rarau mai ki te hui. Ko mihi ngā rangi tēnei, e mihi atu nei kia koutou katoa. Welcome to the Hui Māori Current Affairs for all New Zealanders. E tarawake nei. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Wairarapa Hapū left landless.
You know, a lot of our whānau are disconnected, especially in my direct whānau. A lot of us are not back home.
We look at how kahukura āwhitia are using Givealittle in the hope of buying their whenua back.
We didn't have the full funds, and so we thought we have nothing left to lose.
Radio!
And we check out the training scheme helping unemployed rangatahi Māori get back on track.
3 months later, after joining the course, I get my daughter back. 2 months after that, I get a house.
Why aren't we seeing more of these initiatives being established by government?
No, it's a very fair question.
Tahuti mai. A Wairarapa Hapū is taking a novel approach to regaining their whenua. Ngāti kahukura āwhitia have set up a Givealittle campaign to raise the $500,000 needed to buy back 182 hectares by the Waiōhine River. They want to build a papakainga for their descendants, and they've managed to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars. Kea John Boynton te roangake o ngā kōrero.
The story of land loss reverberates around the Wairarapa.
Our whānau used to live beside the izawa. It was their life source. The water is like the blood that runs through our veins. Colonialism is really what changed a lot of us. But it's not lost to us. It's up to us to bring it back.
But the Hapū of Ngāti kahukura āwhitia is taking an innovative approach to buy back its whenua.
From what I've been told, we're the only Hapū whānau that have really gone through Givealittle to try to purchase land back.
Their dream to give whānau a place to return home to.
If we can get our people back to the whenua and we can live on it and listen to what Papa Tuanuku's saying, then I think that's how we can heal our people.
The Waiōhine River carves through the Tararua Ranges and is a life source to the people of Ngāti kahukura āwhitia.
For me and my extended whānau, this is quite a sacred place for us and a place of healing for our whānau.
For Amber Craig, these waters are where her tupuna gave birth, and it's where she connects with her whakapapa and history in the Wairarapa.
I feel a sense of whakatau, so this is my place where I am calm.
The Waiōhine River feeds the rich and fertile soils of the Wairarapa Plains. But most of the land Amber's ancestors lived on is no longer in Hapū hands.
You know, a lot of our whānau are disconnected, especially in my direct whānau. A lot of us are not back home.
The government bought most of the land in the Wairarapa, which it then sold to settlers who converted the natural swampy plains into farmland. And Greytown, named after Governor George Grey, became the centre of the colonial takeover.
When you drive down the main streets, it's no visibility. You talk about Governor Grey, talk about the other settlers, but not really about our whānau.
The original Māori name for Greytown is Te Hupe Nui, and it's a place where prominent Māori chiefs would have their tangi and whānau would fare well and grieve for them. Today, Greytown is known as one of New Zealand's most beautiful small towns, known for its distinct Victorian buildings. But these colonial remnants are a painful reminder of what the Hapū has lost. Amber's auntie Karlene Te Tau grew up here and is part of a generation who weren't allowed to speak te reo, practice their tikana or learn their history.
We've always been dictated to by colonialism, and yet on Māori tikanga we have our own faith, our own beliefs, our own way of providing for our little communities.
Karlene has spent decades researching the history and whakapapa of her Hapū, and she knows how hard her Pakeke fought to have their land returned.
Their mamwai becomes my mamwai. And to see the fact that They haven't been able to be successful in getting just a blade of grass. That's a big momoe.
But when a section of land near Greytown came on the market, Amber and her whānau saw an opportunity for her hapū to reclaim some of its whenua.
We managed to go and have a look at the property and we thought it was just a great opportunity to kickstart our whānau coming back into the Wairarapa. We didn't have the full funds and so we thought we had nothing left to lose.
So Amber and her whānau set up a Givealittle page to help raise funds to buy back their ancestral whenua. The 182-hectare property behind me sits on the edge of the Tararua Ranges. It's surrounded by native bush and is next to the Waiohine River. The property is near an old urupa and is the birthplace of the renowned chief Ngātuere Tāwhao Tāwhiri Mātea.
We kind of approached a couple of kaumātua to make sure that it wasn't totally out the gate. They were okay with it, and so what we did was we put it out on the basis that we just try.
And within a week, the Givealittle fundraiser had more than $300,000.
Some of the children were offering their pocket money for the week. We had someone who kohard $43,000 just by themselves. We're just massively inspired by it, I think, and just really heartwarmed by the response.
The whānau have put in a tender to buy the property, which is valued at up to $1.5 million. But there's mixed feelings about having to buy back their whenua. The land is currently owned by a farmer and has attracted strong interest. Amber knows it will be tough going up against developers and investors with open checkbooks.
If we're not successful with this land, it's really around that money will only ever be for purchasing another block of land for kahukura āwhitia, for the descendants of kahukura āwhitia.
They're yet to find out if their bid is successful, but their vision is to build a papakainga where whānau can thrive.
And so it's really about remembering who we are as a people prior to the 1840s and how we can have a piece of whenua where we're able to live in te ao Māori, live via the maramataka. How we can, with some of that knowledge, look to innovate and create our own solutions.
Amber's been busy developing solutions for affordable housing. This replica model is made out of plywood printed from a computer.
It's just like a giant jigsaw puzzle, and you put it together and then we have a whare.
How long will it take to build one of these whare?
So the cool thing about this is rather than potentially 6 to 12 months for a normal build, it could be 6 to 12 weeks.
And at what cost?
Well, our plan is to get it below 70,000, but we are trying to remove it down so that we can get it as low as possible.
What would it mean for you to have whānau be able to come home and build whare like this one on their whenua?
I think it's not just my dream, but it's the dream of my aunties and uncles here and our tipuna that we have our whānau return home, because it's only then will we stand tall in our identity and be able to look after Papa Tuanuku.
Carleen Te Tau is proud to see the next generation taking charge. And when it comes to the whenua, her advice to them is clear.
Make sure that when they do get it back, never ever let it go. I'd love to see the whole of Wairarapa back in Māori hands again, in whānau hands. I know that's an impossible dream, but hey,
But it's a dream which is beginning with small steps.
Ahakoa he iti he punamu. So we might not get there today, we might not get there tomorrow, but we'll keep going. Giving a place for our whānau to heal on, but also allowing us space to be able to innovate, because we know that Indigenous solutions, they just work.
Nā John Boynton, tērā kaupapa, and we'll let you know how kahukura āwhitia get on. Next, we speak to Judith Collins about claims of separatism. Opposition leader Judith Collins has been accused of playing the race card, using terms such as segregation and racist separatism to describe the newly proposed Māori Health Authority, and taking fire at the government over a report on how to uphold the rights of tangata whenua. In 2010, the national government signed up to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and in 2019, a working group was asked to consider how Aotearoa could give effect to that commitment, resulting in a report called Hapū. Here to discuss her concerns about Hapū, I'm joined now by Judith Collins. Tēnā koe.
Oh, kia ora.
Before we get into it, I just wanted to get your thoughts on how the government had handled the pay freeze issue.
Well, I actually thought that the government has given some very mixed messages. First off, they've said, well, we've got no money for the nurses and police officers and the frontline staff, corrections officers, but they've also said that, well, we know that they've employed an extra 10,000 bureaucrats here in Wellington. So at the same time, they're sending very mixed messages, and at the end of the day, we've got frontline staff who have to go to work and whose services we absolutely need. And I think the government has been very remiss in the way that they've just come down and slapped around those nurses and the police officers. I just think that's pretty appalling the way that they've actually communicated it.
On Hapū, this document, what is it about this document that's rattled you?
Well, I think it's important, if we all care about our country, to New Zealand, is that we have adult conversations about what the government is planning. So if we're looking at Hapū, I think it is quite a radical interpretation of the treaty, but also it does contain elements in it and recommendations that have clearly been being undertaken by some of the government agencies and ministries, all without discussing it with the wider New Zealand population. So we are not 3-year-olds. We need to be...
You're talking about having a wider conversation with the New Zealand with the New Zealand population, yet you're using words like segregation and racist separatism. Is that a grown-up thing to do?
Well, I think it's actually quite insulting that you have taken that line, really, Mihi. These are words that I use very carefully and clearly, that I think it is really important that New Zealanders know what the government has in store for it. After all, we've only had an election a matter of months ago, and the government did not ever mention Hapū or any of the recommendations in it. They did not ask the New Zealand population to sign up to it, and they didn't actually have the conversation. So if you look at Hapū, there was one particular recommendation that Jacinda Ardern and the government doesn't seem to want to follow, and that is to have a conversation with New Zealanders about what these recommendations are, what they mean, where the future lies for New Zealand. And that's what I'm saying. The New Zealand government owes it to New Zealanders to have that conversation.
Well, let's talk about that document a little bit and some of the concerns you have around it, the segregation you talk about. Isn't segregation just partnership? Isn't that what the treaty promised?
Well, I think that that's quite a radical interpretation where you're going on that. And I think
you're the one who's been saying segregation, so let's just talk about what you mean by that. There's, suggestion of a Māori Health Authority, which, as you know, Māori don't do very well in health statistics. So, by Māori for Māori, isn't that what the treaty promised?
Well, it doesn't actually say that, does it? But let's just come back to the reality of this. Māori are overrepresented in the poor statistics in health. So are Pacifica people. And if you're looking at this in terms of what is actually going to...
Māori and Pākehā have a unique relationship because as tangata whenua and tangata tiriti, they signed the Treaty of Waitangi. So let's come back to the treaty, as you've been talking about to your delegates in the last week or so, and talk about what that partnership looks like.
Well, actually, I don't believe that Pākehā it's Māori and Pākehā. Actually, I believe it is all New Zealanders. And yes, Māori are the first peoples of New Zealand. And
so
yes,
it's
we
about
accept and acknowledge that.
So it's about tangata whenua and tangata tiriti. And so as tangata tiriti, it's anyone else who's not Māori. So it's those two groups of people. And that's the uniqueness of this relationship. It's between them, the treaty signed between those rangatira.
So, Mihi, if you would actually let me answer a question rather than answering it for me, it would be really helpful if the government let New Zealanders know what their plans are. And when we have asked Jacinda Ardern about this, she has, of course, not wanted to answer those questions. It is important that New Zealanders know what the government has in place, and we've made it very clear. We're very proud of our record in government, being able to actually deliver services on the ground with people in circumstances that they're going to find both culturally appropriate and that are useful and realistic. But to set up another bureaucracy based in Wellington with another whole stack of bureaucrats, rather than getting doctors and nurses on the ground in places like Northland and Tairāwhiti, well, that is simply not delivering, and what it is doing is it's setting up a veto power against the entire general health budget.
How different is the Māori Health Authority to the Kohanga Reo Trust movement or Wharikura movement, or some of the relationships that under the national government that was set up on the river and the Awa co-management agreements? There's no difference. It's the same thing.
Well, it's not at all.
It's partnership.
In fact, Kahanga Reo
it's exactly
is not
what Chris Finlayson was talking about when they set those up back when National was government. It's about partnership between Māori and the Crown.
So Kahanga Reo was not set up under Chris Finlayson. It was set up under National. In fact, I think Jenny Shipley was involved in that.
I didn't say that. I said he was in charge of treaty settlement negotiations, which were the river deals and the lake deals. So Kohanga Reo is obviously education. But again, it's a separate entity, which is different to early childhood education.
And it is not compulsory, and it does not have a veto power over the rest of the education system. And that's the big difference between what the Māori Health Authority is said to have, as Andrew Little says, a veto power across the entire $20 billion public health budget for the Māori Health Authority, and yet Kahanga Reo has no such veto power across the education system. It's actually about delivering services where people want it, for people who want it, and non-Māori kids can go to it as well. It's not as though it's only for Māori.
Why are you so opposed to sharing power with Māori?
I'm very happy to have democracy in our country. And if you're talking about sharing power, actually every New Zealander has the ability to have a say in that power.
Mrs. Collins, we're not talking about democracy, we're talking about treaty partnership. It's completely different.
Well, I am talking about democracy, and I am talking about the future of this country. And before people in this government decide that they're going to...
Yeah, but we're having a conversation about the treaty and you keep going to democracy. Talk about the treaty. It's treaty partnership, not democracy.
Well, I'm happy to talk about democracy, and I'm happy to talk about the fact that every New Zealander should be able to be part of that conversation. This is not just between the Crown, which is actually represented in New Zealand essentially by the executive or the government, and Māori. It is not just that. This affects every New Zealander who is also, by the way, someone who should feel that they own, like everyone else, the Dock estate, or that they own everything into New Zealand. But actually this is more important than what the government is doing behind the scenes. This is actually a fundamental part.
Thank you. Are you still planning to stand in the Māori seats?
Well, we are looking for certainly a couple of seats we think that we can. Well, they're based on electorates, just as other electorates are, because as you know, people can either stand in the enrolled in the Māori seats or the general roll. There's no veto power from one to the other. There are simply other forms of electorates. The National Party has long been...
look forward to seeing who you manage to stand in those seats. Thank you for your time tonight. We really appreciate it. Kia mai tonu mai rā te titiro, hei muri ngā whakatairanga ka hau te rangatahi. Nearly 14% of rangatahi Māori are classed as NEETs, youth who aren't engaged in education, employment or training. Now, an iwi-led pilot program is aiming to change that. Paria Te Tai is a course run by Wellington-based iwi Ngāti Toa, and it's providing hope for rangatahi. Kea D'Angelo Martin, tō mātou tangata hou, tēnei ripoata.
It's the type of tertiary training you might not have seen before. An iwi-led course where your aunties roll up to get you out of bed. It may be unusual, but Paria Te Tai is working.
Let's go!
Helping unemployed rangatahi get their lives back on track.
I had my first baby at 13, and then after that, like, my life was destroyed, really. Like, it was like I had to grow up type of thing. My mum kicked me out on the street. She said, oh, since you want to grow up, you can go your own way and grow up.
At just 21 years old, Riria Solomon knows what it means to hit rock bottom. I mean, you were 13, you had your first child. That must have been quite frightening for you.
Yes. 5 months after I gave birth to him, I attempted my first suicide. And that really scared everybody because I actually was about to die.
Riria's eldest child was removed from her care. And with no qualifications, no mahi and no home, Riria enrolled in Paria Te Tai.
It helped with my mental health a lot because I got to express myself in the nature and, you know, feel myself again. 3 months later, after joining the course, I get my daughter back. 2 months after that, I get a house.
Based in the heart of Ngāti Toa country on the Kapiti coast, Paria Te Tai is led by the iwi and focuses on reconnecting their rangatahi to their rohe.
So when Kupe named the manga, he also named this place over here, Mana, Te Mana o Kupe ki Aotearoa.
The course is funded by Te Puni Kōkiri through Pai Aronui, which aims to improve education, employment and training outcomes for 15 to 24-year-olds. Russ Parai and Marina Mangele tutor the course.
When we share our stories and our history, it really does help them to connect that much easier, and it all makes sense.
As iwi, we naturally gravitate to each other and we tautoko each other 100%. This isn't just a job for me, this is my whānau. I'm looking out for our whānau.
Today the class has come here to Whitireia Maunga, overlooking Mana Island and Aukawa Moana.
So the activities had to be meaningful and purposeful, from going over to Mana, to Kapiti, to be able to make that connection, to bring our iwi experts on board to share their whakaaro. So it's that whole story towards kotahitanga and, of course, wairuatanga, that deep sense of meaning or purpose.
And it's that sense of purpose that's helped Riria.
And when's your next appointment with the social worker?
Having struggled with her mental health, Riria says Paria Te Tai has completely changed her life. Now she's getting ready to begin training for her new profession.
So in a few months' time, you'll be a qualified baker.
Yes.
And obviously, then the world will be your oyster.
Yes. Yes.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel so proud of myself, like someone that had no hope in themselves to someone that, you know, loves life and has hope in themselves now.
Like Riria, Kayla Love has got onto a career path through Paria Te Tai, working as a cadet youth counsellor.
I truly believe that doing something that you love is important, and if you're not doing something that you love, it can be really detrimental to your mental health and to your well-being overall. So for them to seek out something that was fitted for me, that was amazing.
Like many rangatahi on the course, Kayla didn't hold much hope of ever having a career.
The year after I left school, I felt pregnant, so I wasn't really focused on what career I'm going to do, what job I was going to get into. I was just focusing on being a mum.
How hard was it for you, doing it all on your own?
I stuck to myself and I was too afraid to go and apply for jobs. I was thinking like, oh man, they're going to think that I'm not good enough, I've had no experience, I've got a son and I'm a single mum, like who's going to take care of him? I don't know how to sort out all these different things. I was, overwhelmed.
But with the help of her tutors, Kayla's been able to overcome those obstacles, a whānau approach that makes all the difference.
It's been incredible, actually. Being able to work with my own family makes me more confident. I feel like it's okay to make mistakes here.
Them knowing and understanding that we're here to support them 100% and that they're safe when they're with us, just reassuring them, giving them that support, going the extra mile, even if it's just going to their houses, giving them a phone call, helping them to connect to the right services.
And it's that constant wraparound support that's helped Riria to achieve her goals.
I'm glad I've done it, because look how committed Marina is to us. Like, pulls up to our houses in the morning, knock, knock, yells out our names and stuff. I thank them so much for everything that they've done for us.
The Paiaronui program is now operating in 4 regions. In its first year, over 300 rangatahi enrolled, with 140 finding employment.
Well, these are not, normal young people. A number of them have come from real tough backgrounds, sometimes intergenerational unemployment, some with a lot of drug use in terms of the whānau, sadly.
Māori Development Minister Willie Jackson says the pilot course is providing a pathway to a better life.
It's very much a whānau-centred approach, a iwi-centred approach, a Māori approach. What makes that young person tick? If that person's just coming in and clocking in with no sort of accountability, no sort of explanation of what's happening outside of those hours, you don't get any change.
From knowing their identity, they're able to navigate themselves in this world. And this is a Māori-led for Māori kaupapa.
If that's the case, why aren't we seeing more of these initiatives being established by government?
No, it's a very fair question. You know, you can see this and you're thinking, well, you know, when you've got, you know, Māori employment 2-3 times worse than Pākehā employment, shouldn't we just ramp it up? And that's what I'll be presenting to Cabinet over the next year or so, because we've had this success, but we're only talking 300. Imagine if it was 3,000.
Today, there's nothing Riria loves more than baking with her daughter.
Good girl.
Her dream is to one day run the wharekai at her marae.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm really excited. Giving back to my people, really, like them helping me. You know, they're my people, and I want to give back to them.
Nā D'Angelo Martin tērā ripuata. Hei tērā wiki I te hui. He's a rebel calling foul on the game he loves.
Basketball is turning into a sport for the elitists, the people that can afford it.
With basketball's popularity exploding, is the sport that began on the streets now out of reach for some whānau?
You come across the number of kids who can't play because of money, but they don't want to tell you.
If you got the money, you can pay. If you don't have the money, you don't. And at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest struggle that we're talking about here.
We meet the man trying to bring basketball back to the people.
We have to fix the system to give them an opportunity, and we're not doing that right now.
Ko hiki na te hui e huama noho ramaira. The hui is made with support from New Zealand On Air.